Hello and welcome back to yet another video on the Alejandro Hernandez podcast, and today I'm going to be recapping the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, and we're going to start with the Texans at the Chiefs. I had the Chiefs winning by a touchdown in this game. They ended up winning by 9 points, and I also had Travis Kelce scoring a touchdown in this game, and he did on a critical third down. We got vintage Mahomes and Travis Kelce once again in the playoffs. They just showed up in every big moment in this game. Obviously, the play that went viral, Mahomes throwing as he's falling down to a wide open Kelce in the end zone. He was spectacular in this game. On the two Chiefs touchdown drives, Travis Kelce had big plays on both those drives. He had the long catch and run that got him down to the 1st and goal. Kareem Hunt wind up punching it in the end zone. Then in the fourth quarter, when it was only a 1-point game, Kelce finds a way to get open and Mahomes gets the ball to him. Just vintage. We've seen this so many times before. It's expected of them, and they always end up getting it done. And in this particular case, they did. And that was all the Chiefs needed, really, to escape. I wouldn't say escape. They were in control of this game from start to finish. But outside of Mahomes and Kelce, the Chiefs' offense pretty much had nothing going. The run game, they had 20 carries for 52 yards. Just the run game isn't there. It hasn't been there pretty much all season, especially this last stretch. Since Isaiah Pacheco has returned from his tibula injury in week 13, the Chiefs have only averaged 3.6 yards per carry and only eclipsed 100 yards as a team on the ground in 2 out of the 6 games that he's played in since he's returned. The run game just isn't there, and when you play Buffalo this upcoming weekend, when you play the Eagles potentially in the Super Bowl, you can't get away with a one-dimensional offense against these defenses, because they'll find a way to make plays and they'll get you off the field. Situationally, the Chiefs are where they're at their best, especially in the run game and down near the red zone. They end up punching in short runs, but in terms of yards per carry, they're not efficient at all, and that's a potential concern heading into this Buffalo matchup and potentially the Eagles in the Super Bowl. However, their defense and their special teams were both spectacular in this game. I knew that the Texans O-line couldn't hold up with the Chiefs D-line, with Karlaftis, with Chris Jones, with Charles Omenihu. All those pass rushers, they caused havoc. George Karlaftis specifically had 3 sacks in this game. He was dominant, and the Chiefs wind up getting 8 sacks, as well as 2 blocked field goals. Leo Chanel, once again, he had a block in the Denver game. He had a block in this game as well. Just situational football, the Chiefs are just second to none in the league. They're amazing in situational football, and that's why they always end up winning these close games. That's why they, in the big moments, they come through, and that's why they're so dominant, and that's why they're on their way to a three-peat. Now, Texans fans around the NFL, even Troy Aikman in the broadcast, Joe Buck, just couldn't be asked with the officiating. I mean, I don't blame them. There were some very questionable calls. There was the roughing the passer on Mahomes in the first drive, which would have gotten the Texans defense off the field. Instead, the Chiefs wind up getting a field goal out of that opening drive. And, then there was the one when the Texans players crashed into each other and they end up throwing a flag for unnecessary roughness. That was just inexcusable. And then Troy Aikman pointed out how Mahomes is purposely trying to get these calls on these late hits out of bounds. There was one play when he was running out of bounds and he purposely slowed his momentum down before he was out of bounds, hoping that a Texans player would whack him so he could flop. And man, Mahomes, I mean, he's bending the rules to his advantage, and you got to give him credit where credit is due. Yeah, it may seem scripted, it may seem rigged, but he's manipulating the refs into selling these calls. Josh Allen does the same thing, but Josh Allen doesn't really get the scrutiny that Mahomes and the Chiefs get. But yeah, despite the officiating, this had nothing to do with why the Texans lost. Their offensive line wasn't good enough. Their special teams wasn't good enough. You can't score only 1 touchdown on the road and expect to win a road playoff game, especially against the Chiefs. You have to do more on the offensive side of the ball. They really only had 1 great drive in the entire game, and that was at the start of the third quarter when they received the opening kickoff. But other than that, I mean, the Texans really had nothing going for them on offense. And yeah, the Texans needed to play a flawless game in order to even make it a close game or escape Arrowhead with a win, and they didn't play well enough to win this game. Now, moving on to the second game on Saturday, we had the Commanders at the Detroit Lions. Wow, I mean, heartbreak for Detroit. Heartbreak for most of the NFL. Even me, my bet on this game was the Lions to score over 30.5 points. They ended up getting 31, so 1 point over on the dot. I got that right, but I had the Lions winning this game, and unfortunately they did not, as they met Jaden Daniels. And I feel like the bigger story of this game that isn't being talked about is, yes, Jaden Daniels and Washington's story is amazing, but this is a big time upset on Detroit's part. Detroit, it's a failure. It's a failure of a season for Detroit. You know, your resume is built on the playoffs and what you do in the playoffs. That 15-2 season they just had means nothing. Nothing. If this were Philadelphia, who was the 1 seed as an 8.5 point favorite and lost to a number 6 seed and a rookie quarterback, the Eagles would be getting killed. But I feel like the Lions kind of have a soft spot for the media because now all of a sudden they're a good football team when they haven't really been in the past. So they haven't received much criticism as I think they should. And the player I think that deserves the most blame for this loss is obviously Jared Goff. You can't throw four total turnovers, but 3 interceptions, 3 back-breaking interceptions in this game. The first one was just awful. He had Amon-Ra St. Brown on that specific play open on the right side of the field. He ends up airmailing Tim Patrick in, I believe it was cover 3. There's a flat defender covering the underneath throw. So that angle is not really there for Tim Patrick to receive that pass. And then you also have a guy trailing Tim Patrick. And then you also have the safety over the middle. So Jared Goff's trying to throw it in between 3 defenders, and he ends up completely airmailing Tim Patrick, who didn't even run the cleanest route. And that went from the game being 17-14 to all of a sudden 24-14 in favor of Washington. And that kind of blew the game open. And Detroit never seemed to gain momentum back from that point on again. And yeah, also the lost fumble earlier in the first quarter. You can't be having that in a playoff game of this magnitude. You can't give Jaden Daniels extra possessions. And the reason why I thought Detroit would win this game is because I thought they were just going to simply outscore Washington. I knew Jaden Daniels would show up. I knew that this Washington offense would put up points. I just thought Detroit would outscore them. But with Jared Goff's performance, they just could not afford this at the worst possible time of the season. They couldn't overcome it, especially with how weak their defense is. They cannot afford to lose a turnover battle 5-0. And I stated in my prediction video, I thought Jahmyr Gibbs would dominate this game, and he did. He had 115 rushing yards on 14 carries. 105 rushing yards on 14 carries, Just Jahmyr Gibbs was explosive as you want your running back to be in a type of playoff game like this. I knew that Washington was exploitable on outside zones, on inside zones. Jahmyr Gibbs had 5 plays on inside zones of 10+ yards. He was just really explosive. The Lions' offensive line was doing a great job of setting the line of scrimmage. Gibbs was going untouched 5-10 yards past the line of scrimmage, and then once he found a hole, he just bursted through it. I predicted that there would be a 65-35 split between Gibbs and Montgomery in this game, and it wound up being 66 in favor of Gibbs and 33 for Montgomery. Gibbs had 14 carries, Monty had 7. Monty couldn't really get anything going because although Gibbs had that burst, Monty didn't. Coming off the MCL, he just wasn't as explosive as Gibbs, and Gibbs wound up getting 175 total yards of offense on the rushing and the receiving end. And despite that monster performance, you'd assume if I read you Gibbs' box score at the end of the game that the Lions blew them out, but it sucks. It really sucks how Jared Goff couldn't perform when the lights were the brightest. And I'm not surprised by Jaden Daniels' performance. I've been saying it since the Buccaneers game that I knew Jaden Daniels had this in him. It seems like now when the lights are brighter, he performs even better than you'd expect him to. He's just been lights out. He was flawless in this game on 4th down. Once again, Dan Quinn having the ultimate confidence in him to go for it on multiple 4th downs. The Washington Commanders became what the Lions are known for, which is a gutsy 4th down team, the punch you in the mouth team. What shocked me the most about this game was the Washington Commanders' ability to run the football with their running backs, not even Jaden Daniels. Brian Robinson had been struggling massively leading into this game. His rushing total was only at 35.5 on betting lines. Only 35.5 yards. He wound up getting 84 yards on 15 carries. And in his previous 5 games, he was only averaging 2.7 yards per carry. And in this game, he wound up averaging 2 times that with 5.2 yards per carry, with also 2 touchdowns on the ground, along with Jeremy McNichols getting another one. Washington had 3 rushing touchdowns on the ground, which surprised me a lot because Detroit had the number 5 ranked rushing defense in the NFL, so I wouldn't expect Washington, who had been struggling getting the run game going, to get it going in this game, but they did. And on top of Brian Robinson and Jeremy McNichols, they also had Austin Eckler coming out of the backfield. He had 4 catches for 41 yards. He was an X factor in the receiving game for Washington, along with Diami Brown and Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz. Washington has weapons. They have weapons, and they're going to give Philly a fight this weekend. But what an upset. Washington being 8.5-point underdogs is just unbelievable. It's a story on both sides. It's an absolute collapse on the Detroit Lions side, being the number 1 seed, going 15-2, having Super Bowl aspirations. A lot of fans, rooting for the Lions to go to the Super Bowl, picking the Lions to go to the Super Bowl and to go out in their first playoff game is just crazy. And overall, Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury deserve massive credit for the performance they've put on, coaching-wise, coaching up this offense, instilling confidence in Jaden Daniels to execute the offense at the highest level that we've seen from a rookie quarterback ever. And I give Washington a serious shot to go into Philly next weekend and pull off an upset, which would be their 3rd upset of this NFL playoffs. Now, moving on to the Sunday games, the Los Angeles Rams at the Philadelphia Eagles. I had the Rams winning this game outright, even though they were 6.5-point underdogs. They wind up covering that spread, losing by 6 points. It was my bold prediction of the weekend, and they had a serious shot to actually pull it off. But multiple plays in this game ended up ruining their chances of that. And I stand firm in the belief that Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay were the superior quarterback and coach duo in this particular matchup. But it still wasn't enough for the Rams to get the job done. And it was solely because of how strong Philly's roster was that ended up giving them the advantage in this game. The main storyline from the game was Saquon Barkley's historic performance, 2 60-plus yard runs in this game. He ended up getting 26 carries for 205 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in this game. And while Saquon deserves all the praise for how he's performed this postseason and this season overall, I think the unit that deserves so much more recognition is the Eagles' offensive line. Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, Mekhi Becton, Landon Dickerson, and that whole unit has just been absolutely dominant in the running game. You've noticed on these Saquon long runs, he's going untouched, just completely untouched. He gets past the line of scrimmage and into the second level of the defense, and there's just nobody home because the Eagles blockers have just picked everybody up, and he has clear running lanes to run through. And with his transcendent acceleration and burst, nobody's catching him. Nobody is catching him in the second level. If he sees a lane, he's going to burst through it, and he is gone. And we've seen it time and time again this season. And the Rams couldn't stop it. All it takes for Saquon Barkley throughout his entire career is just one lane. One play. You give him one play of just a clear running lane, and he's going to go the distance. And he proved that in this game once again, even in the snow. That didn't even stop him. And yeah, let's move on to the other side of the football. Matthew Stafford, I thought he played well enough to win the Rams this game. The massive momentum-changing play was after Jalen Hurts got sacked for the safety. It was 16-15 Philadelphia heading into the fourth quarter. The Rams had just gotten back momentum as they were within the game was within reach for the Rams. On that drive where they got the ball back from that safety, the game was for their taking. It was their game to lose. And Kyren Williams lost them the game with that strip that Jalen Carter did. That was what shifted the momentum right back to Philadelphia, and they never looked back from that point. And I feel like it was less of Kyren Williams' mistake. Although he's had fumbling issues throughout his career, I think this was more of a spectacular play by Jalen Carter than it was Kyren Williams' mistake. And that's a testament to Howie Roseman for building such a terrific roster to have so many playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. They're without Nakobe Dean, but then you also have Zach Bond, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Quinyon Mitchell was out in this game, and then the Rams started picking on the third-string quarterback, Isaiah Rodgers, but they also have Darius Slay, who made multiple pass breakups in this game. They have Cooper DeJean. Just so many playmakers on that defense, and Jalen Carter wind up being making the play when the Eagles needed it with that peanut punch. He had 2 sacks in this game, 2 tackles for loss, 1 tip pass, and obviously the forced fumble in Kyren Williams. And he had the most key play in this game. Other than the Kyren Williams strip, he also had the sack on 3rd and 2, which pretty much killed the Rams' hopes of coming back in this game on their final drive. And another concern I pointed out for the Eagles was their kicker, Jake Elliott, who wound up missing 2 extra points in this game, making it only a 6-point game from when the Rams were driving down the field. So had they scored a go-ahead touchdown, they would have been up 1 instead of either tied. And if Elliott makes both those extra points, it's an 8-point game instead of a 6-point game. So that's a concern to look out for Philadelphia. He's missed 3 extra points this postseason, and he's got to clean that up if the Eagles don't want to shoot themselves in the foot in either the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. And overall, I thought my bold prediction had a serious chance of coming to fruition, but the Eagles roster proved me otherwise. Saquon Barkley proved otherwise, and it proved to me too much for the Rams to handle. And what surprised me the most is how the Eagles are winning in spite of their quarterback. And it's not taking a shot at Jalen Hurts. He just hasn't really had to step up and be the reason the Eagles are winning games. But the Eagles have such a stacked roster around him that he doesn't have to be Superman the way Josh Allen is, the way Lamar is, the way Patrick Mahomes is. He doesn't have to put on that cape. He can just hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley and win football games. And if that's the way the Eagles want to play, and that's the way the Eagles, that's their winning formula, that's their winning formula. And the media is going to trash on Jalen Hurts, but he's not being asked to do what these other quarterbacks are being asked to do. He can just sit back, hand the ball off, take care of the football. Throughout this whole season, he has less than 5 turnovers the entire season. He just doesn't turn the ball over. And if he doesn't turn the ball over the rest of this postseason, then I don't see who's beating the Eagles. I don't. I really don't. If he just takes care of the football, that's their winning formula. Run the football, play great defense, don't turn the ball over. We don't need you to even throw for 150 yards, let alone 200, 250. Just take care of the ball, make smart decisions. And that's how the Eagles are winning these games. And I didn't think it was sustainable. I thought that the better quarterback and the better coach in Matt Stafford and Sean McVay would take advantage of that weakness of Philadelphia. And if it came down to a final drive in the 2 minutes where the Rams took the lead and the Eagles had to go respond, I don't think Jalen Hurts is capable of leading that drive to go win the game. But he hasn't been put in a position like that all season. So with all that being said, the Eagles are a spectacular team. And yeah, the Rams, although Matt Stafford played a hell of a game, it just wasn't enough. And the Eagles roster got them this win. Saquon Barkley got them this win. Now moving on to the final game of the Divisional Round Weekend, we got the Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills. I had the Bills winning this game, and they did win by a total of 2 points, winning the game 27-25, getting Josh Allen getting the best of Lamar Jackson. And in this matchup, Josh Allen proved to be the superior quarterback at the end of the day. This was the battle between who was the real MVP of this 2024 season. I knew it was Josh Allen all along, and he proved me right in this game. And it's a disappointing end to the Ravens season, who, I mean, if there was ever a window that was closing, it's seeming to be the Ravens. It'll always be open because of Lamar, but in terms of the strength of their roster, they're going to be losing a lot of players due to age, such as Marlon Humphrey, who's been getting older. Michael Pierce is getting older. Roquan Smith is getting older. Obviously, Derrick Henry. Just a lot of aging players. And that window was either last year and this year, and they couldn't get it done either year. And the Ravens prided themselves all season in being a team that did not turn the ball over and was one of the most prolific and efficient offenses in NFL history, having the number 1 rushing attack and having the number 8 passing attack, leading the number 1 total ranked offense in the NFL. That did not turn the ball over in the regular season. In this particular game, they had 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, and 1 interception, which ended up costing them the game. I mentioned in my prediction video how the Ravens tend to get away from their identity come playoff time, and they did that yet again in this game, giving Derrick Henry only 16 rush attempts for 84 yards. He was efficient on his rush attempts. For some reason, they just didn't really try to establish him. He got stuffed early on, and they got away from him. And now in games, I mentioned in my previous prediction video, in games where Derrick Henry in the playoffs rushes for 100 plus yards, his team is 4-0. And when he doesn't, They were 0-4 heading into the game. Now they're 0-5 since he ran for only 84 yards in this game. The Ravens' identity, when the Ravens have been dominant, when nobody has wanted to see the Ravens, is when Derrick Henry is the head of their offense, not Lamar. And it was the opposite in this game. Lamar was the one putting up the stats, leading drives, instead of Derrick Henry. And it's because the Bills got out ahead like I thought they would. The Bills led this game 21-10 heading into the third quarter. And they pretty much controlled this game from start to finish. There was never a point that when I was watching this game where I thought the Ravens could win or had a chance to come back in the game. I thought the Bills were always in total control, even though they only scored 6 second-half points. Their defense played outstanding, getting Matt Milano back, Terrell Bernard, who caused a big fumble, and Mark Andrews in the fourth quarter, and Teron Johnson. Those 3 players who missed the first Ravens-Bills matchup played huge roles in this game. And the Bills wind up getting 10 points off the 3 Ravens turnovers, and on the other side of the ball, Josh Allen took care of the ball. And a surprising factor in this game for me, watching it, was the Bills' ability to run the football with their 4-headed monster in the backfield with Josh Allen, James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis. They've been spectacular, and in this game, they were against the Ravens' #1 total defense in the run game. Yeah, the Bills' offense was spectacular in the run game, and they dominated this game, and they won the time of possession battle, which is usually dominated by Baltimore, but in this particular game, the Bills won it, and that's what tilted the game in their favor. Now, Mark Andrews is going to be the scapegoat for this game for his fumble and his 2 drops in this game, and one of them being the pivotal 2-point conversion that would have been to tie the game. But Mark Andrews is not the reason the Ravens lost this game. They got outplayed on both sides of the ball, on offense and on defense. And obviously, you're going to look at that one huge mistake and blame it on Mark Andrews and hammer down on him, but really it's also on Lamar. It's on the game plan heading into this game, not to give Derrick Henry the ball as much as they should have. Not any design runs for Lamar Jackson. There's a lot of mistakes the Ravens made in this game, and Mark Andrews is being the sole scapegoat along with Lamar Jackson for his turnovers. But I feel like it was more of a team loss and a team failure than it was just 2 individual players that cost them the game. And in terms of Lamar, he's now 3-5 in the playoffs. I can't give him a pass or an excuse for this game. You can't have 2 turnovers when you've only had 4 interceptions all season that really weren't your fault. In this game, you had a horrible pick and a bad fumble. And I give him credit because he didn't crack and he didn't fold after those 2 early turnovers. He ended up rallying his team back later in the game, which he hasn't shown that he can come back from those early turnovers in his past playoff games. But in this one, he responded well, which I give him credit for, but he was not good enough to win this game. He needed to be better in order to give Baltimore a chance to go into Buffalo and win this game. And I remind you, the Ravens were favored in this game. They were favored by 2 points. Overall, I love this Bills team. I believe they're the second best team in football behind the Kansas City Chiefs. And I also believe that the winner of the AFC Championship game will win the Super Bowl. And this is the year for Buffalo. If there was ever their best shot, it's this year, going to Arrowhead for the AFC Championship game. And it's going to be a great storyline and a great game to watch to see if Josh Allen can finally get the best of Patrick Mahomes. Overall, it was a great weekend of football. Very exciting games, all 4 of them. I enjoyed watching every single one. Unfortunately, my parlay that I had showed you guys last episode went 3 for 4. The only one that missed was the Rams. And in terms of teams, I had the Chiefs. I had the AFC side of the playoff picture good, and then the NFC the complete opposite. I had the Lions and Rams advancing, and it ended up being Washington and Philadelphia that advanced. However, on the AFC side, I had the Chiefs and the Bills advancing. So went 2 for 2 on straight up winners and went 3-1 against the spread in this game, in this weekend overall. So I'd say I was more successful in the wild card weekend than I was in this divisional round. I'll look to bounce back in the championship weekend games, and I'll give you guys my predictions for those games very soon. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.